So we are in the midst of the SDG agenda, which was signed in 2015 and it's supposed to end in 2030. Now there have been mixed signals coming up from the various studies. Some say we're doing well, we are on track, while others say we're completely off track, and there seems to be quite a bit of a gap between our expectations. Secondly, the UNESCO headquarters had launched the Futures of Education report, which they produce a seminar report every 25 years. And we wanted to have one which provides a state of assessment of the education systems and how we learn from what we have progressed, what we have not done well, and sort of put forward a picture for the 21st century, in education for the future. That's what the assessment was primarily set out to do. So provide a state of assessment on education systems and what we have learned and how we could improve an education for the future. Well, it seems like a no-brainer, isn't it? That every person is different. We pride ourselves on that. But yet when it comes to education, we throw it out of the window and then sort of say one size fits all. It just doesn't make sense. And my conviction to this is based on a personal, on top of what the science and evidence says. And from a personal, I had a son who was diagnosed with acute dyslexia when at a very young age, but luckily we caught him at such a young age because he was already starting to be labeled as slow and he won't be able to meet the challenges of society. He's now a flourishing young man who, because of the fact that we were able to identify and provide a personalized education, he has flourished. And I think we owe it to every young or every child out there to provide a personalized education system because they all are wired differently and learn differently. And that, I think, is why it is essentially a human right. The findings are important, but I think the process that we took for this assessment are very important that needs to be institutionalized. And what I mean by that is science and evidence-based foundations for policy making in the education sector. A multidisciplinary approach, bringing in experts from a variety of disciplines, but also practitioners and experts, teachers, parents, all very important clients in this sector. And what's very important, because you have so many different perspectives, you're bringing in evidence from so many different disciplines, that consensual science is important, where we get consensus to sort of say, with the knowledge that we know of this particular aspect of education, is with this confidence that we think that we should undertake this form of policy recommendations. So as our knowledge improves, the evidence improves, our database broadens, and with the diversity of data from across the world, I believe that the education policy making just can only be strengthened. I think the most important question that we have forgotten to ask is, what's the purpose of education? I think we have got into the nuts and bolts of trying to implement it. So take an example, SDG 4. It says inclusive, equitable, and quality education. But for what purpose? Is it an education just to build a human capital, just to be meeting the needs of an industrialized society for economic production? Or is it for the individual's flourishing? And I think we have a huge gap in terms of understanding how we could design an education system for flourishing. I think we're doing pretty well for human capital, but we all know that that is only one part of the puzzle, of the overall puzzle. And what this assessment has really very strongly demonstrated is the whole brain approach. A brain, many people think it's a no-brainer. Sorry for the pun of words, but you have to focus both on the cognitive as well as the emotional dimension, because learning is not just a cognitive process, it's an interconnected process of cognition and emotions. And that's so important for the flourishing of the child. Well, my first hope is that many of the findings and the recommendations trickle down to actual policy implementation. And I believe UNESCO will be steady and ready to stand by and support countries and member states. My second hope is that this process gets institutionalized, that some science body would make sure that this type of an assessment is taken every 5 years or so, build a database, build the evidence, and improve our policy making in the field of education. And my last hope is that every child gets the benefit of a personalized education for his or her flourishing. At the end of the day, we must emphasize that it is the well-being of the child.